Good day, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. Congress returns with shutdown deadline looming as Epstein files hit Capitol. Putin and Xi deepen ties in Beijing, calling alliance unprecedented amid U.S. tensions. Taliban pleads for global aid after devastating earthquake kills dozens in Afghanistan. Former CDC director warns RFK Jr. rhetoric could endanger U.S. public health. U.S. Army vet arrested for FBI over protest, charged with conspiracy against ICE. Let's talk about the First Amendment. Israel accused of genocide as Gaza strike kills at least 31 Palestinians. I wonder who's funding these genocides, who have been funding these genocides, or over 63,000 Palestinians. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to cover just a couple of stories for your news update this morning. And I think it's very imperative with the stories we're covering because at the 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization, you have Xi Jinping slammed what he called bullying behavior and called out Cold War mentalities when it comes to the U.S. as well as other Western allies. And you know what's important about these things, ladies and gentlemen, is that we call these things out because we can't act if America is totally innocent in a lot of things that have occurred around the world. We've had plenty, if not numerous, of whistleblowers to come out with actual evidence and documents of some of the atrocities that America has, been a part of. And again, we love this nation, the good red, white, and blue. We, myself and others, thousands of others, have bled for this nation. But we should at least call out some of the things that we've been a part of that we should not be happy or gloat in. Now, Congress had returned from summer recess with a high stakes deadline to avert a government shutdown by September 30th. And House members are pushing for a continuing resolution, but bipartisan divisions and Trump's unilateral spending cuts make progress uncertain. Separately, pressure mounts to release Epstein-related files as House members prepare a survivor's press conference. I wonder if we're going to get more deflection when it comes to the Epstein files. I wonder if we're going to get more deflection because anytime the Epstein files are brought up, certain individuals that lean right, as well as people within the Trump administration, even himself tries to deflect and divert the conversation. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell came out and basically stated that Trump never did anything inappropriate, and the government agency that was questioning her never asked her for a specific when it came to names. Now, again, I wonder if these names that were omitted or left out, if they again have some sort of link to people who are in President Trump's cabinet, because she also stated that there are still people who are associated with Epstein that is part of Donald Trump's administration. And here's the thing, all of this will go away eventually if the Epstein files, unredacted, and the only, again, names that are redacted are the victims, the actual victims, and not the people who have done these alleged crimes or these alleged sexual acts, to be released. And once that is released, I believe the only thing that can occur from there is court cases and prosecutions, etc. But eventually will go away. But I don't think the way that America is looking at Epstein files, you'll have people right, left, center, people who are not even affiliated, still wanted the release of these Epstein files. Some people, this is good drama, this is good TV, but for other people, they want those people who had any dealings or any connection in the harm of innocent young men and young women to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And I believe that we all should want the same. Now, and of course, we believe that a lot of these people are very powerful businessmen and women. But again, it seemed as though Ghislaine Maxwell, again, was a part of this ring, as well as the scapegoat. Because the only two people, I believe there was a couple of others, but not many, but the big names that got prosecuted was Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. So again, I'll keep you guys updated on this because it seems as though that the House are not allowing the Epstein files to go unresolved, because this is what the American people want. Finally, and again, like I stated before, this is a bipartisan thing. Now, the whole recession with the government, they're trying to prevent a shutdown. Has Trump made enough connections? Does he have enough control? Because again, when we look at the three echelons, the three levels of government, he basically controls it all or have great influence. So can they get this passed before the government shuts down by September 30th? I will keep you guys updated with that as well. Now in Beijing, President Putin hailed ties with China as unprecedented, deepening their political, economic, and military alignment, especially notable in the preliminary agreement for the massive power of Siberia and natural gas pipelines, signifying long-term strategic cooperation. As I told you guys, we as a country can really ruffle the feathers and break a lot of ties, no matter if we are allies or we're neutral with a particular country. Now, we can't call China our enemy when we've done, I'm talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in business with China over the past 20, 30 years or so. And we make jokes about it, but a lot of the things that you have in your home right now, if you pick it up on the back of it or underneath of it, it says made in China. So on one hand, we can't paint China as the enemy. Then on the other hand, the only thing that we have in our homes are Chinese products. Yeah, our governments could quote unquote be at an impasse, but then we have great partnership with Chinese businesses and manufacturers and distribution. Okay, that's a conflicting nature because a lot of these businesses have to report their earnings and their connections to who? CCP, the Chinese government. These are not different entities. They're all within the same, just as though American businessmen, even though they try to evade taxes through tax loopholes, which is legal. If you use a loophole, it's legal. Some people make this seem as though that is illegal. It is not. You're using a loophole, meaning that is something that resides in the law and you are exercising your right given the tax loophole through the tax codes. But nonetheless, when we look at this, a lot of times they would like to have us to have a duplicit mindset about China, even though majority of our products, majority of the things that we buy were made in China, but it was shipped from a US company. But again, it says made in China. So I want you guys to really think about that. But now I want you guys to think about this as well. Russia and China, they've always been allies, but they are deepening their ties. Look for India to join in with this. Now, granted, they're all connected already by the way of the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. So they're already in deal, but they're deepening their ties on a very strategic standpoint when we're talking about military equipment, technologies, so on and so forth. And again, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, he's actually traveling to China as we speak. Okay. So again, a lot of these countries that the West in some regards have disrespected, have not done great dealings with, they're now siloing themselves to separate themselves from the West and America to form their own coalitions like the BRICS and support one another that again can hurt America. Economically, that is, and to a strategic standpoint, depending on the technology, because do not forget, I think it was 10 or 20 years ago, a lot of our technologies, not software, but hardware, a lot of the shell and components of military equipment was constructed in China. So again, when you see the iPhone 16, iPhone 17, a lot of those components were made in China, but again, Apple doesn't allow China to have any of their software, but the components they're in. So they're having the hardware technology, but not the software technology. I'm just giving you an example. I believe all of this is imperative and important because they can share that information with Turkey. They can share that information with North Korea and India and Russia. Because again, we have not been making a friend of China. And I know what a lot of people are going to say, well, China has been doing espionage. They've been having spies over here. They even had a police department here in America. Absolutely correct. All of those things are correct. But is there a more diplomatic way to go about handling China versus this? We're going to raise tariff. We're going to revoke a Chinese student visa, but we're also going to allow 600,000 Chinese students in. Oh, no, we're going to lower the taxes on China. Then we're going to give them a grace period. You see what I'm saying? A lot of the things that's been going on economically, and I know negotiations are very complex, but the back and forth of, okay, China, we're going to give you 50% tariffs. Oh, well, we're making deals. We're negotiating. We're going to make a contract. We're going to make it 25% tariffs. Okay, Russia, if you don't do this, we're going to raise your sanctions. Oh, India, if you continue to buy your gas and oil from Russia, we're going to raise your import taxes. We're going to do sanctions. Well, India is going to lean harder into Russia and China and say, you know what, we don't even need you guys. And matter of fact, we're going to recall all of our software tech people out of your Fortune 500 companies, and we're going to fuse them into Indian companies, into Chinese companies, into Russian companies, and make sure that their technological software is more advanced than America. Is that possible? I'm just asking a question. Because, see, I am pro-America. I am pro-America first. But in order for us to really to think about these things, we have to look at it from the standpoint of the way they're looking at it and some of the moves that they're making. And again, I know we have all sorts of think tanks that are probably thinking about the way that we should handle this, but the way that things have been happening, we've been pushing more countries away from America and then bringing them into the fold, okay? Because let me guys also tell you this. A lot of these other countries, they don't forget America's past. They don't forget some of the things that we've done to these countries. And we're going to touch on that as well. Okay. Now, following a deadly earthquake in Afghanistan, the Taliban urgently called for international assistance. The terrorist group out of Afghanistan is calling for international assistance. Okay. The humanitarian crisis has reached a critical juncture with requests for aid pouring in amongst global attention. I'm just wondering, on the world stage for the humanitarian effort, or we're going to bypass that a terrorist group is running an entire country. Now, not all the citizens of Afghanistan are terrorists. So should global humanitarian networks stand in and support the Taliban so they could render aid to the citizens of Afghanistan? Now, the humanitarian in me will say absolutely. But then the military in me would say, could they use these resources that we could provide for all the people in aid as leverage to have a lot of them to join the Taliban or commit senseless acts of terror? Again, I'm torn. I just don't know how to go about this when you have a known terrorist group like the Taliban, and some people call them freedom fighters, peace fighters, upholding, the culture and constitution of Afghanistan, etc. But the world views Taliban as a terrorist network, as a terrorist agency, as a terrorist group. So, and they're the ones who are running the government and the country of Afghanistan. So these are some of the things that we definitely have to think about when it comes to stories like this. So I just want to make sure that I give you my full opinion on how I look at these things. Now, the former CDC directors are ringing alarm bells about RFK Jr. anti-vaccine rhetoric, warning that his public health stance pose serious risk to Americans' well-being. Now, anything that goes against, let's say, an arbitrary number like 10 years of science-based vaccines should not be eradicated. Now, not all vaccines are bad. There's a lot of diseases and viruses that vaccines and us being vaccinated here in America had prevented us from catching a lot of these things. The measles, the mumps. Now, the chicken pox, I think everybody in America, I would like to believe everybody, especially in my generation, caught the chicken pox. Some people caught it twice, even though they say you can only, catch it once because your body create those antibodies. But yeah, I haven't heard anyone catching chicken pox more than twice. But there's a lot of vaccines that prevent some of the ancient old viruses and diseases to be affecting us in modern day times. Now, that's backed by at least 10 years of research and trials. And I hate to say this word, experiments, because again, there's a lot of experiments, as I told you guys about environmental health crisis. I touched on that last week. But again, these are some of the things that we look at, because everything that RFK Jr. is doing, do we agree with? Now, I won't take back what I stated. I believe RFK Jr. is the right man for the job, but that doesn't mean he can't make mistakes. We've all made mistakes on the job. We've all had mishaps, right? With certain information that contradicts another piece of information, we have to make a choice and find out it's not the right choice. That does not mean he's not the right man. But it is very possible that he may be going too strongly on anti-vaccines, because we have almost 100 years of proof that a lot of vaccines are effective in preventing disease and viruses from, unaliving a lot of American citizens. The FBI has arrested U.S. Army veteran on conspiracy charges tied to protests against ICE fueling debate over civil liberties and federal enforcement and veterans' rights. Now, me being a veteran myself, these are one of the freedoms that we fought and died for. Not just the symbolism of the flag, but the very bedrock of the foundation of America, which is the Constitution and the amendments therein. And if he's getting arrested by exercising his First Amendment right for the same thing he went to war for, the same thing that he put on the uniform to upheld, then how in the hell can this guy be incarcerated, detained, or even locked up? Now, I know a lot of people, red-blooded Americans, are out there. He should have never said nothing. No, this is a Constitution and the rights that he has that's given. And if you are against him protesting against ICE, then that means that you are anti-Constitution. You're anti-constitutional of the rights that the Constitutions give us. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it states right here, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, meaning he can protest against ICE, or the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. ICE is a federal government entity. The Constitution is the Constitution of the United States of America. It's a federal government document. So by arresting this former veteran, the FBI has violated his First Amendment rights under the Constitution. So I don't care whether it be political or your belief system, you should be totally against the arrest of this war veteran, of this veteran that has signed up to give his life for his country and now exercising his constitutional right. I don't care what side you stand on. You should be totally, totally against that. That's not what I believe. That is what I know. Now, an airstrike continue across Gaza. At least 31 Palestinians have been killed, fueling accusations from top genocide scholars that Israel, from top genocide scholars that Israel is committing genocide. And coming out of the Times of Israel, member of Genocide Association says group's leadership pushed through Israel condemnation without discussion. I'm just going to read just a little bit of this for you guys. Let me blow it up. It says here, Brown says only 129 associate members voted on the resolution out of an estimated membership of around 500. The association's membership was informed ahead of time about the vote, but many chose not to weigh in, likely because they did not feel qualified to address the issue, Brown says. What do they mean they don't feel qualified of 63,000 people being unalived, being murdered and killed, whether it be purposefully or incidentally or by accident? I've showed you guys last week of the IDF taking videos of them doing demolition runs of the buildings in Gaza. Not all of the buildings and structures in Gaza was destroyed because of war with Hamas. Oh, we have intel to state that Hamas is in this building, whether they be in the building or underneath in tunnels. Let's bombard that building. We got it. We understand. But we have video clips of news agencies and press and even American envoys there of the IDF taking videos of demolition crews going in, planting explosive and just blowing up buildings. And the IDF say, well, they were strategic in blowing up these buildings because we believe by leveling these buildings, we can have a plain view of sight of where Hamas could be hiding, whether it be in tunnels or buildings. What? What happened to the Mossad? What happened to your intelligence agencies of giving you actual reports of them doing recon, of them partnering with on-ground citizens to give you actual reports of Hamas sightings? Let me continue. It goes on to state that favors those activists who are seeking to advance a false narrative about Israel, Brown says. It wasn't rushed. It was forced through without the usual transparency. So you mean to tell me 63,000 people that possibly wasn't even part of Hamas, and let's just say for the sake of argument, let's say 15,000 of them, 20, I'll even raise the number to 20,000 were Hamas fighters. So 43,000 people in counting. And see, when we say those people have been unalive, and again, I'm giving a very large number of 43,000. I think it's more so if you take away the account of Hamas fighters being killed because of the war, it's most likely 55,000 innocent Palestinians who've been killed. We're not still talking about the Palestinians who have contracted diseases and viruses because of the living conditions and drinking unclean water, contaminated water because of bombshells, dirt, rubble, all sorts of things, ladies and gentlemen. That's number one. Number two, starvation in the region that people are dying from. And then three, people who have lost limbs, eyes, also arms and legs, who will not live a regular life if they can make it through this alleged genocide by the IDF. Then I asked my question, a small country, but yet powerful like Israel. We have associations stating that there's a genocide happening in Gaza. The UN hasn't stepped in yet. The UN hasn't recognized Palestine as a statehood, even though there's Palestinian passports, Palestinian people, Palestinian flags. And some people believe the reason for this is because Israel is expanding its nation, and if the UN jumps in, they will have to put troops on ground to stop this alleged genocide. Even though a lot of the scholars are saying that this is a genocide. So let me provide even more context. Genocide, the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. When I look at the genocide that's happening in Africa right now, in Sudan and Darfur, genocide. I think this past weekend in a township in Sudan, over 1,000 people were murdered. 1,000, over 1,000. And we're talking about a genocide. I mean, there's been many more over the course of the months. But right here in Palestine, we're looking at over 63,000 people. So my question still remains, how a country so small, but yet so influential, but yet so powerful can continue to allege genocide of another nation that they did the UN partition plan that gave them land in that region. And the majority of Jews and Israelites in that region, in Israel, in the region and landmass of Palestine, are Eastern European Caucasians. But they would tell you that, oh, we're different ethnic. But if you're a different ethnic, that must be based on your religion. I'm not being anti-Semitic. I'm talking this through so people can understand. And listen, if anybody wants to have this discussion with me live on this channel, I'll have this discussion. Because the only thing you have to do is look at the president. The only thing you have to do is look at the prime minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. His family roots are from Poland. His father and himself is Polish. They changed their name to make it sound more Middle Eastern, to make it sound more Jewish. These are just facts. This is not rhetoric. These are just facts. But again, I go back to how a nation so small, not even bigger supposedly than New Jersey, but again, committing suicide in a region that the UN partition plan gave them land, number one. Number two, they're still trying to expand their empire by the way of the West Bank in Palestine and the way of East Jerusalem in Palestine, and they're totally demolishing Gaza. How? It makes me think about America and how America is linked to a lot of long line of genocides, because we need to really talk about the truth and not sanitize history. They teach us in school, but the blood-soaked reality of American foreign policy from its very inception, the United States has blood on its hands, not just within these borders, but across the globe. Not just genocide of foundational Black Americans, which we are still here because our numbers would have exploded. We'd probably be more than 14.5 to 15% of the population that we are today. We'll probably be more so 20 to 25% of the population, but of the genocide, not just in slavery, not just in Jim Crow, not just inciting the Black codes, but even today. Because, ladies and gentlemen, genocides just don't happen in silence. They are funded. They are armed. Who do you believe that Israel is getting their resources and funding and military equipment from? And then they are politically protected. You come out and you say anything anti-Jewish, anything anti-Israel, you are automatically labeled as anti-Semitic and or racist. Just because you can speak on your perspective and your opinion, even if you provide facts and evidence, meaning that is no longer your opinion, is this the truth? And see, in the United States, through 3-letter and 4-letter agencies like the CIA, FBI, NSA, and even Guns for Hire mass as contractors, has played a leading role in a lot of the genocides that America has been a part of, or in some reports have even excited on a certain degree. The indigenous Holocaust in America. Because before the CIA, before the FBI, the U.S. government itself orchestrated genocide against Black Native people, as well as the Red Native people, American Indians, through forced removals like the Trail of Tears, through massacres like Wounded Knee, and through broken treaties backed by military force. America set the blueprint for state-sponsored genocide. The U.S. backed coups and genocides abroad. I just want to kind of build a foundation of how they've committed genocide even on this land. As we look at Indonesia back in 1965, documents and whistleblowers have since revealed that the CIA handed over kill lists of suspected communists to the Suharto regime Between 500,000 and 1 million people were slaughtered, and Washington called it a victory. Guatemala, 1954. The CIA toppled dramatically elected government that dared to challenge U.S. corporate interests. And what followed were decades of massacre against indigenous Mayans with American weapons and American training fueling the slaughter. I wonder what Fortune 500 companies, what ghost governments that's backed by billion-dollar business men and women have also supported and excited these genocides that America has been a part of. Let's look at Rwanda in 1994. Because while the world watched the machete swing, the U.S. quietly refused to intervene and pull back UN support. They literally told the UN, pull back. Because when we look at the UN and all these other, the WHO, the World Health Organization, I want you guys to look at the people who are on these boards. I want you to look at who gives majority of the funding of a lot of these organizations. America and Americans, and showing that the genocide could proceed unchecked. Silence could be very complicit when we talk about genocides. See, we can't just allow our country to falter. We cannot allow our country to fail. That's why the truth must be spoke. When you look back at all the great empires, from the kingdom of Mali being the most powerful empire in the world at one point in time in Africa, to Genghis and Kublai Khan, when you look at all the Chinese dynasties, you look at certain world powers trying to, Great Britain trying to take over the world, Hitler trying to take over the world. You go back even to the Roman Empire. When I started to look at America, and I'm not referencing as an empire, but this as a country, as well as these other countries I've named, we are doing some of the same things that they've done in history that allow a lot of those countries, empires, and dynasties and kingdoms to fall and to fail. We are literally repeating some of the things they've done in the past that had those nations, that have those countries to fall and fail. We are literally repeating the past. I even thinking about my time in the military, the Middle East, when I was deployed to Iraq, because the Iraq war was launched under false pretense, allegedly, but it destabilized their region and created the breeding grounds for endless death in those countries. Because you had contractors like Blackwater carried out massacres while the U.S. spilled billions in weapons. See, we don't directly do these genocides, ladies and gentlemen. We fund it. We use henchmen and straw men to negotiate contracts of either weapons or support, whatever that faction needs to eradicate a certain people from a certain nation, because we have special interests. It's either political or it's business-based. Because don't believe a lot of these businesses don't have some part or have some influence in a lot of these genocides around the world. And in Gaza, as I stated before, 63,000 Palestinians have perished under Israeli bombardment. Entire neighborhoods, entire communities, entire lineages of people and their families have been reduced to rubble. And what is the U.S. doing? What is this great nation that we love so much is doing? We are supplying the weapons, supplying political cover at the United Nations, giving the United Nations every excuse and every reason under the sun why the things that Israel is doing in Gaza is warranted. Supplying the very tools used in what top genocide scholars are now calling a genocide. I wonder what took them so long. Was it 10,000 people, 20,000 people, 30,000 people, 40,000 people, 50,000 people? Oh, it took 63,000 people for all of these top scholars to say, you know what, there's a genocide in Gaza. Wow. And unfortunately, this isn't new. This is Americans' pattern of supplying the weapons, fund the killers, silence the critics. You know what? Let's go to the UN and basically tell them, you know, this is not a genocide. This is the IDF trying to eradicate a terrorist group called Hamas outside the state of Israel as well as in Palestine. We know that Palestine can't do anything because they don't have a military. So after we supply the weapons and we fund the killers and then we silence the critics on the worldwide stage, when it comes to the IDF, they just bomb and kill, you know, the reporters. But anyway, that's what the reports say. And then what occurs from there? They wash their hands while other people bleed. Is this rhetoric? Is this conjecture? Is this a conspiracy theory? Am I just making all these things up? The whistleblowers don't say that, because from Daniel Ellsberg to Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, and countless anonymous insiders have shown us again and again America's secret agencies don't just protect the homeland, they export death. Greed may overcome the American dream. I remember when the American dream was having a house with a white picket fence, a two-car garage, two cars for mom and dad, and maybe one for the teenage son or daughter. Living in a middle-class neighborhood in suburban or urban America and going about living a great life. Everybody wants to be a billionaire. Everybody wants to be a millionaire. And they go to hell or high water to get it. So the question is America guilty of genocide? The question is, how many genocides has America bankrolled, covered up, or directly committed? I love this country because this isn't about hate. This is the truth. And the truth has to be spoken, even if it burns. So my question to you guys, if you love this country as much as I do, and you don't want it to fail, you don't want it to be toppled by being part of continuous atrocities of funding, supporting, whether it be by henchmen and contractors or even straw men. Do you guys know, believe, or think that America is a part of the Palestinian genocide?